Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the fifth panel in our ongoing Immersive Tech panel series. My name is Jameson Spivak, and I'm a senior policy analyst with the Future of Privacy Forum, where I lead the organization's work on immersive technologies. Today's panel will be focused on the key issues that arise from the use of artificial intelligence in immersive spaces. Before handing it over to my colleague Amber to kick off the conversation, I wanted to place this panel in the context of the overall series. Immersive technologies like virtual reality, spatial computing, and neurotechnologies are changing the way we work, play, learn, take care of our health, and much more. At the same time, privacy legislation is gaining momentum around the US, and regulators have indicated they will use their consumer protection authority to address privacy issues in digital technology industries. It's not always clear how privacy laws would impact immersive technologies differently than other types of technology. But on a deeper level, there are also questions about the new privacy risks that arise when immersive technologies are integrated into domains like health, advertising, and education. As these technologies become part of our everyday lives, it is critical to understand their capabilities, their unique risks, how regulatory proposals might address them, and best practices that organizations can adopt to protect people's privacy. Through a series of panels, we seek to address these emerging questions by asking, what is unique or new about immersive tech? So far, we've explored how immersive technologies can greatly improve how we deliver healthcare and education, conduct advertising, and provide safety and navigation features in vehicles. But we've also looked at how these applications, without proper safeguards, could threaten privacy by, for example, enabling inferences of sensitive personal information. And next month, on December 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, our final panel will focus on how immersive technologies impact kids and teen privacy. But today we're focusing on AI. So I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Amber Ezel, Policy Counsel for FPF's AI workstream, who will moderate today's discussion.
Thanks, Jameson, and I'm excited for today's discussion. So as Jameson mentioned, the focus of this panel is the intersection of AI and immersive technology. So today, we're excited to have an engaging discussion on key issues that arise from the use of artificial intelligence in immersive spaces. Some of the things that we'll be addressing are what are the potential benefits, challenges, and risks of using generative AI in extended reality environments. I know that this has been the year of AI, so I'm sure that our panelists have a lot to say about that. We'll also look at some of the privacy laws, policies, and ethical considerations that should be taken into account regarding the use of AI as these technologies are developed. And I know that our panelists are really knowledgeable, so we're sure to have some valuable insights and guidance for no matter what your area of interest are or your background. We'll provide some guidance to professionals, researchers, and enthusiasts that are interested in exploring the intersection of AI and immersive technology. So before we get into the conversation today, I just want to turn it over to our panelists and allow them to introduce themselves. So Elise, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Amber. Really excited to be here with everyone. My name is Elise Dick. I'm a policy manager on the Reality Labs team at Meta, where I work on our metaverse policy team. My primary focus is on digital representation in the metaverse, but I do also do quite a bit of work with how we're translating all of the work that we're doing on the AI side into immersive and metaverse spaces. So really excited for this conversation and excited to hear from everyone else today.
Awesome. Thank you, Elise. We're excited to have you. Kareem?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invite. My name is Kareem Muhammad Ali. I work at Google. I'm a manager on the Government Affairs and Public Policy team. I cover augmented and virtual reality policy as well as AI policy for our hardware and platforms businesses. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Kareem. And last but not least, Michael.
Hey, thanks for welcoming me here. I am Michael Runningwolf. I am Lakota, Blackfeet, and Northern Cheyenne, and I am a AI researcher for natural language processing for indigenous languages in North America. And I work at Mila as a tech lead for the First Languages AI Reality Initiative, focusing on research involving data sovereignty for indigenous communities and also conducting ethical research for net language reclamation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. So to kick things off, because we all have different backgrounds, and we have a diverse amount of people that are on the call today. So I'll ask each of you this first question. If you could give an overview of some of the ways that AI is used in immersive spaces. So I'm not sure who wants to take the first stab at it.
I guess
You're
I can
all
say,
Yes, Michael.
yeah, I guess, yeah, it's me thing. I guess not enough. I think there is huge potential and huge in technological intersection. It's probably because of VR that AI hardware is so good. Like just like 10 years ago, we were trying to solve this problem of how do you render two screens in an XR headset, and how we didn't have the capability, the technical capability, when it's with development. It wasn't parallel with the AI resurgence, and so it's kind of funny how there's very little work. There's been some interesting work in XR and AI, but it's pretty limited, at least in my opinion, on what could be done. Like you're not really seeing a lot of generative AI XR experiences, even though it's totally feasible because it's just another lens into the technology.
Kareem?
Yeah, plus one to everything that Michael said. I think when most folks think about AI in an immersive tech context, they're probably thinking about content generation, since most of us are familiar with tools like ChatGPT and Bard. But I do want to point out too that AI is also used in safety, security, and privacy. And so when you look at the Google Play Store, for example, every time you download an app, it's scanned for malware, and the AI is used to identify high-risk applications. And I think Play Protect does like 125 billion scans per day. And so as we think about AI in an immersive tech context, I think a lot of focus will go towards content generation or like developer tools, but the less perhaps cool side with safety, security, and privacy, but no less important, is something that we should all be thinking about as well, especially given the risk of new attack vectors and cybersecurity concerns in this immersive context.
Awesome. Elise?
Yeah, I mean, we have said for a while now that AI and the metaverse are going to go hand in hand, right? AI is crucial to building the metaverse, and the metaverse is crucial to accelerating AI, which is really exciting that we're at this place now where we're sort of seeing these things finally converge. We've used AI for things like mixed reality. That's built on AI models that let us merge physical and digital space, which is a really important step to a future metaverse where we have augmented reality environments. And then you think about things like LLMs and chatbots that you can use as AI assistants. Thinking about how in that world where people are navigating physical and virtual space, being able to have a guide, an assistant, something to surface content and recommendations to you within these immersive environments, whether we're talking full VR, MR, or a future augmented reality world. And then, of course, as everyone I'm sure is thinking about, there is the opportunity for content generation. The metaverse is very much still being built right now, and we do really believe that generative AI and content generation with generative AI models is going to empower a lot more creators to actually build out these spaces and build spaces that people want to participate in. So like Michael said, I think there's a lot more opportunity than what we're seeing right now, but there are so many different use cases for AI in the metaverse, and we're really just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah, no, thank you all. Yeah, I guess on that same point, I wanted to know, I know, Michael, you mentioned that there's a lot more potential with the incorporation of AI in these immersive spaces. So I was wondering if you could expand on that. And I know, Elise, you alluded to it as well. So what would you say about some of the potential ways that AI can be integrated that we're not currently doing, but there's potential in the future?
I think they're like, particularly with the new headsets, Inside Out tracking, Kareem and Elise, I think make a good point in that. There is AI, it's just kind of mundane and not the first and foremost component of XR experiences. I mean, like the hand tracking on the Quest is all AI. It's deep learning models, inside out tracking. That's all. This combination of traditional modeling and algorithms and deep learning. But what I'm talking about, what we're missing is that we've had Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant, and voice-based experiences are pretty minimal, pretty nominal. Like there is some, but not really truly immersive. Like it's kind of rare to see that kind of voice-based user interaction. And other types of AI-enabled user interaction with XR, it seems pretty nominal. Like there's cool pose detection kind of stuff going on, but it's pretty nascent right now, to be polite. And there's just I think the technology is there, and I'm kind of really curious of why it hasn't been leveraged in XR experience. And that's what I mean, is that there's a lot of things we could do that's just not happening for some reason to create really engaging user experiences that use technology that we've had for 10, 20 years, like voice AI, voice assistants. Like large language models are new, but we've had automatic speech recognition for a while now. And why hasn't it pervaded XR experiences?
Elise, did you want to weigh in as well?
Agree with everything Michael said. I think that audio and voice-based is really an area for exploration. We're so quick to think about content generation, and that is going to be really important. But immersive spaces are fully experiential, fully sensory. We should be looking into ways that we can leverage AI across the experience, not just visual elements.
+1, I think you both covered it all.
Awesome. Thanks, Kareem. So, all of you alluded to, some of the ways that AI is being incorporated into immersive technologies. And so one of the things that you just referenced, Michael, was about hand tracking. And so when it comes to like body-based data, both AI and immersive technologies require vast amounts of personal data. And so, theoretically, the data that is collected for these technologies, like body-based data, device and gameplay data, like spatial and location data, all of those are pretty sensitive, but could be used to train AI and personalize it for each user. And so I can think about some of the ways in which this could be beneficial in having that personalized experience, but also it could be, somewhat intrusive. So is there a way to maximize some of the benefits of this technology, but also minimize the risks as well? And then are there certain types of data that maybe shouldn't be permissible because the risk is too great?
Perhaps I can start. I think there's probably two angles to look at this with, and the first one is around user control. I think it's very important to make sure that users of these experiences understand what data is being used, why it's being used, and then also how it's being used, where it's going, who's looking at it, if anybody, and then when it's deleted, for example. And so just allowing that level of control and transparency is something that Google thinks is really important, and hopefully other developers and AI companies think so as well. And then there's also different policy considerations that you want to think about. Google has long advocated for a federal privacy bill, and in the U.S. and also internationalization of similar laws and commitments. And I think it'll be really important to consider, what types of information are permissible, what use cases are permissible, perhaps considering a risk-based approach, and then also considering, sensitive information. So information like health, race, or religion, or sexual orientation, those are all kind of protected attributes when it comes to Google services, and I would imagine would apply in future iterations of the internet. And I think it'll be important to consider all of that in scope as these technologies develop and the policy environment continues to become clearer.
Yeah, and to kind of build on what Karim is talking about and being, I think going back to your question, Amber, is that you can train AI without user data. What I mean is that you don't need to violate someone's privacy or use private PII data to create a reasonable functioning AI for certain domains. And everything I'm saying is an asterisk, technically not true. So like there's nuance and there's nuance here that's not being spoken, but we don't have time. And what I mean is that suppose hand tracking, for example, the to create hand tracking AI, you don't need to gather the data of all your users. You just need to create a training data set. And assuming ethical practices, there's no privacy problems there or any ethical issues there. And you don't need your user data to enable that. Now, where the nuance starts to come in is if the model was able, the AI was able to be refined using my data, it would be more accurate for me because I have unique ticks, unique hand behaviors, and allowing the AI to be refined based upon my data will enable the AI to be more useful, but it also then becomes a privacy risk. And so I think drawing the line where I think it's important, as Kareem kind of mentioned, to begin to differentiate what the trade-offs are for a privacy first stance versus a UX stance. If your goal is to objectively maximize the immersive experience and optimize it the best way possible, you will need to give up your user data, potentially give up your PII data to the whoever's building the system. Or if you're willing to accept a degraded experience, a non-optimal experience, and maybe it's perfectly fine, by the way. We don't, to some degree, not everything needs it, right? Not everything needs fully maximized, optimized personalization. And I think that's where the nuance needs to come in, with the XR and, the biometric tracking data.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add to those 2 points. I think that personalization is incredibly valuable, and a lot of things that people want to do with AI will require certain information about them. But it does come down to user trust and user controls and understanding where those lines are and where people are going to want to have control over their data versus just a seamless jump-in experience.
I'll jump back in again. I saw Joseph's question around user control with regards to AI models or usage for specific use cases. I think it's a really good question. Opt-in, opt-out is probably one of the first ways that I've seen in current iterations of AI models being used within the context of the 2D internet. So for example, Google launched this tool called Google Extended that allows website publishers to just opt out of their website content being used to train our large language models like Bard. And that's something that we should consider in future iterations of the internet as well, and in spatial computing contexts. And then also for use cases, I think this is something that we already see, for example, on mobile computing. And so location-based data is something that is fairly sensitive, right? You can identify a lot about a person based on their movements or where they're going. Usually you have to click, yes, I consent to this data being used for this particular context. But behind all of that too is understanding, where this information is being used, if it's being used to train a model, how it's de-identified and aggregated, how secure it is, right? And so I think we should consider it in that context, and give users choice whether their data is being used to train models, or when it's being used during specific use cases. Hopefully that helps clarify.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So on the user control piece, I know that when we think about how AI is being used in general, especially in light of the executive order that came out last week, a big piece of that is user trust and safety. And so I think that user controls play a big piece in that. But also, on that piece, how can developers design these immersive experiences in a way that's transparent with users about how AI can or is being used while maintaining that enjoyable experience? I was talking to somebody earlier today about just even within the context of AI and hiring, for example, if you're disclosing to a user, like every single time, like, hey, your application is going to be evaluated using algorithms, every single time, like you're getting that pop-up, it might, it could either increase your trust in the decisions that are being made, but it could also decrease it as well, depending on how your outcomes are. So, it is a trade-off when you think about that user experience and that design, but also making sure that you're still having that enjoyable experience. And so what do you all think about that? Like, how can developers design these experiences in a way that balances both, like that transparency piece, but also having that personalized and enjoyable experience?
One of the things I think is so great about the metaverse and immersive experiences is there's a lot more opportunity for contextual transparency than you might have on a 2D surface. So you're not just looking at a screen and clicking through. You might have visual indicators that tell you an AI is being used, or you might have different ways to set user expectations in immersive spaces that just don't exist in 2D experiences today. So I think we can add that also to the list of things that can be explored for AI uses in the metaverse. There are really exciting ways that we can make learning about AI and understanding your privacy with AI an interesting experience rather than confusing users, throwing off their experience, interrupting their immersion, and just creating an overall clunky user experience because we're so worried about transparency.
I think education also plays a role. I think it's understanding, making sure users and customers understand the ramifications of these systems. I'm going to call out one of our attendees. Brendan is a researcher who did research on eye tracking, and there's some ramifications when you track eyes. You can actually measure potentially PII behavior using eye tracking, and having users understand that it's possible that it could determine your gender and sexuality based upon your subconscious eye movements that you don't have complete conscious control over. And having users understand the trade-offs and the risks, and so you don't surprise users that all of a sudden, if someone who is in a vulnerable place and then they're being outed by the technology unintentionally, just making sure that they understand that these risks do exist, and that there's, and make it sort of the onus upon the engineer and the developer is to make sure that these risks are plain and obvious, that they can make the decision in informed consent and not buried within, like you kind of alluded to, Amber, like 15 pages of EULA, who actually reads them? Lawyers, and they even probably don't even read them most of the time. And so it's important that we avoid dark patterns, particularly in the metaverse, since it's such a nascent, again, to be euphemistic, nascent technology right now. We don't want to set a standard where we're dependent upon dark patterns, where we're trying to steer users into bad behavior that they don't fully understand.
So I want to address a question in the chat because I think that it's really important. Someone said in the chat that the biggest problem that they see with generative AI, for example, is that it's a black box. We talk about how it's difficult. I know, Michael, you just mentioned education and helping people understand like how these technologies even work in the first place so that they can make informed decisions about, the choices that they're making, being able to give that proper consent and not, like you just mentioned with dark patterns, being steered into making decisions that they may not otherwise have made. And so one of the things that that was mentioned in the chat was that, when it comes to like women or, other minorities, they might receive negative outputs from these AI tools, just by nature of their demographics, right? And so one of the things that is top of mind for me in my work at FPF and, as I think and parse through some of, where the federal agencies are moving in terms of like promoting civil rights and, anti-discrimination measures. How can immersive technologies be designed to promote inclusivity and diversity, and to avoid, amplifying bias from training data in these AI systems? I guess I'll ask Michael, because Michael, I know you're doing a lot of interesting work, and so I'd love to hear more about that, and if you have any thoughts about how these can be designed with inclusivity and diversity in mind.
That's a big question, and we don't have probably 20 years to go over.
We have like 30
Basically,
minutes.
yeah. Well, I think that basically the short story is that there are systemic endemic problems with Western society, as is in the United States and in North America, which has created the situation where there's bias in technology, and most of it, 99.9% of it's unintentional. And so, like this particular issue of resumes being evaluated, yeah, because the fundamental problem is that women make up less than 25% of the tech workforce. And why is that? The systemic biases that are historical that we can't change history. So what do we do now? And like one of my friends says, you can't eat a whole buffalo or bison in one bite. What you got to do is take small bites. And so I think we need to focus on the most urgent things and to make sure that the engineers and the users are cognizant and educated and capable of giving consent and are enabled users and have agency in the system. And what I mean is that we need more Native American software engineers. We are a percentage of all PhDs awarded in North America, according to the CRA Talbay survey. There's like just two of us at most are ever graduated per year. We have one tenure tracked computer science professor in all of North America, and he happens to be one of the attendees, by the way. Going to keep pointing at Brendan. And there's just so few of us in the space. Like there's probably only 12 of us in all of North America who are practitioners of machine learning. Like just think about that. There's only about a dozen of us who are practitioners, either in industry or academia, or and working for NGOs like myself. And we just have a core fundamental problem. So the short-term solution is we need to get more indigenous people into college. Like there's the systemic barriers. Like for what I mean is that AP computer science. I was fortunate to be a panelist at code.org CS EdCon last week in Las Vegas, and I got to see the dome. But anyways, and the strategy right now is to teach people, the technical strategy is to teach people remotely, deploy either Google or Amazon or Meta, Microsoft. They're all pouring a lot of energy into internet-based computer science education with the goal toward getting underrepresented groups into computer science. That's fine if you have internet at home. Unfortunately, most Native American communities do not have basic internet, basic water or electricity even. So what do you do? And so one of the things I'm working on is with the nonprofit I'm working with is Lakota AI Code Camp, where we, with the benefit of Meta AI, good nice shout out to Meta, bought us some laptops, AI capable laptops. It's basically gaming laptops, and we took it into the field in South Dakota amongst the Lakota and taught the teenagers, high schoolers, how to build their own AI. And so until they have fiber is across North America and in the rural poor this is not just a Native American problem, this is a rural poor problem. Until we have that, we need to have strategies that account for the fact that not all of us have internet access. And so those are the kind of things I'm interested in doing. Like, of course, it's more resource intensive and it takes more intentionality, but that is necessary given the systemic barriers that are in place. Like, until we solve these core problems that will never go away, like racial bias, gender bias, are not going to go away no matter how much money we spend. So what we need to do is do extraordinary efforts with high intentionality to overcome these barriers, and particularly in AI and XR. Because there is a hunger and thirst for this technology. I'm working with the community in my NLP research, natural language processing research, who's a Gwich'in elder in Northwest Territories and on the Canadian and Alaskan border, like way deep north. they don't have internet, they don't have good cell phone reception, but they love and are developing by themselves XR using, the Quest, because the Quest is great and cheap. And they're building their own XR experiences and investing in AI. So there is a thirst. There are partners out there. We just need the resources to lift this up, because we're willing to do the work. We just need a little bit of help to make the task a little bit easier. And sorry, I went on a little soapbox there. So apologies.
Fascinating, fascinating. You definitely raise a lot of, important points about how important it is to, not just put, these technologies in the hands of diverse populations, but even in the way that they're trained, the way that these tools are developed, and it's important to have a diverse set of voices in the room. Kareem, Elise, I don't know. And you all are at companies. Like, what kind of measures have you all put in place, or what are some of the considerations that you all have thought about, in terms of making sure that there are, inclusive, training efforts?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, but I'll be curious to hear Elise's thoughts as well. I definitely empathize with Deanna's original question around resumes and black boxes. I myself, have wondered in the past, what keywords do I need to use in my resume to get past the screening tool, right? And I think Michael hit the nail on the head. Is one of the first steps is just recognizing that there's an issue. I think a lot of folks would be surprised at how many people just kind of don't consider it or don't think about it. And then also bringing those diverse perspectives to the table. So whether that's developing, a tool like Realtone that Google launched with one of its Pixel devices that allows folks with darker skin colors to appear properly in photographs, which has historically been an issue, or with resumes. One of the things that Google has done, at least internally, was through this tool and research program called Petal. I have not looked into this program recently, so please don't quote me on this, but Petal is a tool where we research like who was applying to Google, and since there's such scale in that number, we were able to understand like what are the demographics from folks who are applying. And we found that outside of a certain character range in the job title, for example, you'll see minority candidates drop off in their applications. And we created a tool that we can put our job descriptions through that scans it for these parameters. And what we found was roughly a 5 to 10% increase once we corrected those changes in the job descriptions in those minority candidates, which doesn't sound like a lot, but keeping in mind that all of this technology is affecting real people, and, real human beings, that's something that is meaningful to folks, especially in this area where discrimination and bias is a very real concern.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I follow both of those. I agree that, it's a matter of making sure that these technologies are being built, not just with diverse communities in mind, but with the consultation with diverse communities, whether that is making sure that our hiring pipelines are diverse, or making sure that we're getting computers into the hands of communities across the country who may not otherwise get them. Or also, as we're building these technologies internally, making sure that we are working with diverse communities, reaching out to the right experts and stakeholders to make sure that, check our work, make sure that we're building something that is going to function well and meet these different needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm learning so much, and I'm excited to look into all of the things that you all have mentioned so far. So we talked a little bit about diverse populations, particularly with regard to race and ethnicity, and also gender diversity as well. But another thing that comes to mind, and I think we've seen a lot of focus with the FTC as well, is like children, because I'm not sure the demographics of who's using these tools, but I definitely know a few young people that are really interested in immersive tech. And so, one of the things that I think about is, some of the vulnerabilities that may, and the special risks that may come as, younger folks are using these tools. So are young people particularly vulnerable to some of these risks posed by AI environments? Like, should they receive, special protections?
I can start. I'm not I think there is research that very young children should not be using XR because it messes with their spatial ability and their spatial development. But in terms of AI, I think that's I feel the next generation is going to have a better grasp on the AI than we do. Because at a fundamental level, if we're in the middle of a transformative technological change that we oldies in tech don't really understand. And I think the next generation will probably have a better grasp because they'll have grown up in this environment, whereas we engineers and thought leaders don't really have a grasp. Like take generative AI, it's actually hugely impractical. I mean, it's computationally expensive. It takes a ton of data, and no one's making money off of it other than Amazon AWS, and or Microsoft Azure. Like because they're the ones hosting these kind of things. And the big winners here are currently the service foundation providers, and I kind of feel, and there's sort of a blind spot in how we're leveraging these tools, and I think we don't really understand their utility. And so it's going to be kind of the children who are interacting with this, and I don't think it's going to be as big a risk from generically. AI won't be a huge risk to children, other than the privacy ramifications, which already exist, because we already have been interacting with AI based systems like YouTube or Facebook or Snapchat and all the other social media systems. And so I think I don't, other than the privacy concerns, and obviously with the exception of fundamental developmental processes interruption, like I don't think AI poses a particularly new large risk, um, other than someone using Bard or Llama 2 to generate horrific scenes for the children. And that's more an issue of red teaming, making sure that Meta and Google are red teaming their AI so it's not generating um, horrific data for children to interact with. And there also obviously is also the one last point I'll wrap up here is hallucinations. But I always kind of feel that as a modern user, I kind of feel children will adapt to the fact that AI just fundamentally can't help itself from lying. And so I kind of feel they'll be better prepared to deal with that fundamental problem. Yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Michael. That's really, really insightful. I think that, when it comes to the applications of AI in general, like what we're seeing, from the federal agencies is that it's important to just comply with the law, right? We have existing laws put into place, to make sure that, that data is treated well. So one of the other things that I think about is just like online safety in general. I think we talk about it in terms of, children, but also, there's still also user safety that needs to be considered just for anybody. And so how can AI be leveraged to ensure that user generated content within immersive technology adheres to safety and community standards, not just for children, but for anybody?
I think we can apply a lot of the same principles and standards that we've learned, over the past 10, 20 years via social media or big digital platforms, such as YouTube, to apply that to also, user-generated content in spatial environments. So using AI to scan for potentially offensive content or misinformed content, as an example. Also, just surfacing the fact that it is user generated in like a YouTube context. That's like obvious, right? Because everybody is uploading their own material. But if they're posing as somebody else, right, that could become a problem. Or if it's like governments trying to influence elections on these platforms. Those are all things that I think AI can help with via scanning content. But one thing I think to keep in mind too is that there's always going to be edge cases, and especially when it deals with topics like recent news or events or political conflict, things like that. where it can get tricky. And I think we all have to recognize that those exist, but we need to do a lot to manage those risks via AI and also outside of AI. And I think that's just a matter of prioritizing it, and just examining how this evolves in spatial contexts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kareem, one of the things that you just mentioned was, political content. And one of the things that I've been doing a little bit of work out on at FPF is really thinking about the use of generative AI to influence campaigns and elections. And so, obviously, just by nature, when you're dealing with immersive technology, it can make something seem more real, right? And so how might, the integration of AI into these immersive experiences allow for more like effective influence of campaigns and manipulation? Or even, even to be more optimistic, not just, influencing campaigns and manipulating voters, but also to, give them more information that can help them make, more informed decisions. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, especially with our elections, our big election year coming up here in the US. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's such a good question. And I think this is kind of an emerging topic where we recognize a lot of the potential pitfalls. So deep fakes, for example, or even just synthetic content used in political advertising as an example. And I think there's going to be other, novel ways that we see this emerge that we can't predict right now. One of the things that we're trying to keep pace with is just like watermarking. And so I think Google, across all of its platforms, for political ads now has a requirement that synthetic content or other content generated by AI has to be very clearly marked as such. So if there's an image of a politician doing something that didn't actually happen, like there has to be a very clear mention of that. Yeah, it's incredibly tricky, and I'll be curious to hear what Michael or Elise have to say about this as well.
I think, like if you step back just in general from deepfakes, yes, we could mitigate the worst of it with things like watermarking, but what's really risky are state actors who have been manipulating, Western elections, and watermarks have been defeated. They're basically, if you Google, get a GitHub repo, you can remove AI watermarking pretty trivially. And there's even some papers that just came out recently. And I think, but that's honestly, for the most part, I think everyone is well-intentioned, regardless of what your political beliefs are of the other side, whatever stance you are. I feel what really will inoculate will be just education, making people understand that deepfakes exist and you must question the veracity of your sources of information, and also fundamentally understanding that AI lies. AI hallucinations are a thing, and so, but when you start putting that into the XR context, currently XR content has such a high production requirement that I don't think deepfakes are going to be an issue for probably at least 6 months. Probably a little bit. I think currently we're probably okay. Someone's going to come up. I wouldn't be surprised if either Meta Reality Labs or Google X or whatever the lab is called is going to come out with 360 XR generative AI content. But until then, we're probably okay, because the risk with XR is that XR can be therapeutic, and also like people can get over their fears of arachnophobia and whatnot through therapy using XR. Now that could also mean it's a two-edged sword. You can also do the other thing. Like it's probably highly likely that you can give a traumatic experience using XR. And I mean, start introducing generative AI and deepfakes, I think then the risk starts to become more higher, amplified. But I think currently, I don't think deepfakes are a huge issue, because deepfakes, number one, after you've seen enough of them, you get to realize there's sort of like a look, the way generated text, generated images, they all kind of have that look. The eyes aren't quite lined up. The facial expression is kind of weird. And if you know what to look for after a while, you become sort of inoculated to that.
If I could jump back in, I'm not sure I actually entirely agree that deepfakes aren't a problem now. I think there have been examples in the past year, such as that Nancy Pelosi video that was circulating on social media about a year plus ago. But I think a lot of experts, AI experts and researchers, are saying that they're actually surprised at the pace of development. And so just a year ago, we debuted this text prompt to video AI generated content, and it was not great. And already we're seeing, not just at Google, but elsewhere, that text to video or even just single image to video creation is becoming more and more impressive, and the pace is only going to accelerate as compute becomes more available. I do agree, however, on like traditional watermarks being trivial to kind of circumvent, the Getty Images style kind of watermark. The other way to do that is through metadata, which is also trivial enough to remove or edit. One of the things that Google's researching currently with some of our top cloud partners is this technology we've called Synth ID, SYNTH ID. This is where a watermark is embedded directly into the pixels of the image. And it's novel. It's not fully proved out yet, but after initial internal testing, we've done like 20 plus different ways to distort an image. The watermark holds true, and this could be one example of an innovation that can be used in detecting synthetic content. And I know Adobe in their consortium with other tech companies is also examining this. And I think it'll be really important as this AI tech becomes more and more sophisticated and also more accessible to average users.
Oh, thank
And
you.
you're right, Karim. And
Oh,
you're right. You're right. I don't have to say what I meant is deepfakes in XR. Fully immersive XR deepfakes are not yet prevalent. I mean, it doesn't. It kind of sucks for trying to create 360. And that's what I meant, Karim. So to clarify, yes, and Nancy Pelosi, that kind of stuff. Yes, obviously, I'm not trying to rewrite history.
Thank you so much. We have just a few more minutes. I want to bring Elise in, bring her back in. I guess, how are you thinking about mitigating some of these risks of manipulation and in the spread of misinformation? Because one thing that Alex said in the chat is that misinformation doesn't need to look real to affect an audience, and that many people are fooled by misinformation, whether it's made with or without AI. So when it comes to the spread of misinformation potentially from these immersive spaces, how are you thinking about kind of reducing some of those risks?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is actually we haven't fully understood how people receive information in immersive spaces, right? It's not as well established as your search engines or your social media platforms, where we have a pretty solid understanding of what people are viewing, how they're receiving it, and how they interact with that information. Immersive spaces are so new that thinking about what manipulated content would even look like in a lot of these scenarios is really probably where we need to start. It's not just going to be a picture that someone shares with their friends, right? It might be an interaction with another person who's telling you something. So before we even start thinking about the technical mitigations that are equivalent to what we have today for 2D synthetic media, I think we need to understand what the information ecosystem in a metaverse future is even going to look like.
That's a really, really good point. Like you said, because this is so new, it's hard to know what the long-term impacts would be, or kind of even what the landscape does and even could fully look like. So I think that that's a really good point. I want to open it up to the audience for questions. Please, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. I would love to see it. I'll give it just a moment if anybody has any questions. I really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned so much from you all, and I'm excited to see kind of where the landscape goes. I don't know. Okay, I don't see any. Keep the questions coming if you have any. Yeah, any any questions. to bring in the chat. Okay. I guess I have a question for Kareem. I know we talked a lot about like just what this landscape looks like in the. Oh, Alex has a question. Okay, I did not see the question. Oh, I don't know if anybody else can see the question. I can't find it.
Oh, I think that
Sorry.
might be yeah, I think maybe Elise or Kareem could probably better answer that question.
Yeah, there's a question just for those that may not be looking at the chat. Alex in the chat said that he flagged AI training on the edge. If any of the panelists have any comment on that.
Yeah, I see Alex's question, and I think if I understand correctly, like there are ways to mitigate sensitive information going all the way to the cloud and back, and keeping it on device. And on-device compute is a really effective strategy in keeping personal data safe. And even so, like even if it wasn't about security, it also is just easier for like compute loads, for example. So. For example, if you had a pair of smart glasses or a headset, they may offload compute onto your phone or another nearby device in order to save on battery life, for example. But I think it like highlights this really important point around on-device compute is that there are ways to be effective without everything having to go to cloud and like having it, the query responded to by this big powerful model, right? There are effective use cases like proofread or small text generation that can happen on device. And that's one way to keep data safe and secure, or at least more safe and secure. And that's also why silicon investment is really important. A few years ago, Google released their Tensor chip, and we've updated it every year, and it's custom designed for AI applications. And that allows exactly like what Alex pointed out, like this sensitive information to stay on device instead of going somewhere else.
Elise, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that as well?
No, I think Kareem covered pretty much everything I would say on this too.
And speaking more broadly, I being a former cloud engineer, the large language models are very expensive. I think it also makes sense from a fiscal perspective to do less AI in the cloud as much as possible because it's really expensive. It is quite expensive to be running these large language models. And there's a movement because Meta opened up Llama. I've noticed there's work, like there's a C++ version of Llama that takes very little overhead, computational overhead, so it can deploy onto edge computing. And I think that sort of will probably be the natural end stage where we have competent, capable XR devices or even our phones, and these AI are going to be shifted to the device, if only because of the financial considerations, because it's expensive to run custom hardware in the cloud for interactions that are not being charged. Like it's not revenue competent to be running these large AIs in the cloud. I think it's going to make more sense to put them onto the device, which will have the nice side effect of being more private or potentially more private. Obviously, depends on the company rollout to how they're going to treat the data.
Awesome. I think we have time for just one more question. There's a question that came in through the chat from our friend that has gotten many shout outs, Brendan. Do any of you all, any of the panelists see advancements in 3D spatial data visualization and modeling as risks for 3D immersive generative AI, or are these technology components decoupled since they apply AI models for mechanical subtasks like reconstructing views of 3D objects and not decision making or high level environmental modeling? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, like whether there's advancements in 3D spatial data visualization and modeling, like whether that's a risk.
So I'm not familiar with Gaussian splatting. I am familiar with NERFs, which I think is a Google research project. It stands for Neural Radiance Fields, and essentially what it allows you to do is take an image and then create like a 3D model of it. I don't see that itself is based on a neural network, right? And so it is a form of generative AI, but perhaps just not labeled as such. I don't see it as a risk for this, and I think it's perfectly acceptable for there to be multiple pathways to a solution, such as generating content in 3D. And that's what innovation is, right? There's competition to do this research and see what's the most effective, what's the safest, the most private, et cetera. So I don't see that as a risk. That said, I would not consider myself a deep technical expert on the topic.
Michael, Elise, do you have any thoughts?
Great question, Brendan. Yeah, I agree with Kareem. I think the only risk is if the user data then becomes part of the production, because that seems to be the trend right now. But that's another thing. Generative AI in general has a user or vendors of generative AI are using interaction data to help improve the model, which is a valid use case, but it does have privacy ramifications. I think in this specific case, unless someone turns Nerf into a product category, which is entirely feasible, I think anything could be a privacy risk, quite frankly. If we get if someone wants to be you could turn anything to a privacy risk, quite frankly. It has been demonstrated by the industry. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, by the way. It's just generally.
Elise, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm also not a technical expert in this technology, but generally I'm inclined to agree with Kareem that the creation of 3D content in and of itself is not necessarily a risk. And when it comes to thinking about generative AI specifically in UGC.
Awesome. Okay, so for this last part, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round. So if everybody could go around in 15 seconds or less, if you could say like one of the most emerging things for us to be looking out for with regard to the intersection of immersive tech and AI, what would you say? I'll give you like 10 seconds to think about it. That'll be our last question before we close out. What's on the horizon? Okay, maybe I'll give you 20 seconds, not 15 seconds.
I'll go real quick. Unfortunately, I did not get to go into the sphere, but it's amazing to look at. And I think that kind of hints that there is a hunger for shared immersive XR, because that's basically what it is. Like getting people into a room and having a collective experience together, I think is going to be transformative. There's technical limitations and why that's not really happening now, but I think that's the future.
Mine's very similar. I think how generative AI can enhance social experiences and bring people even closer together in our immersive spaces. I think we're just now seeing the potential of generative AI for things like content generation or voice assistance. But I think once we combine those things in immersive social experiences, it's going to be really exciting.
Those are both excellent points. I took maybe a more nerdy approach, but I think a lot of folks should be paying attention to policymaking in these emerging technologies. Whether we have effective policymaking or not will in some ways dictate kind of the evolution of this technology. And in like a good example might be the 96 Telecommunications Act kind of shaped a lot of what the internet looks like. And so we should be paying attention now for both immersive technologies and AI when it comes to regulation and legislation worldwide.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Y'all heard it here first. 2024 predictions from our Future of Privacy Forum Immersive Tech panel panelists today. So thank you all so much for joining today's session. As Jameson mentioned at the beginning of the call, the next and final panel for the Immersive Tech panel series is going to be on Wednesday, December 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and it will focus on immersive technologies and kids and teen privacy. So thank you so much to all the panelists that joined today. This was a really interesting and engaging discussion. And thank you all so much that were able to join today and ask really great and engaging questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Bye all. Thanks again.